After 2 straight seasons, ending in heartbreak in the Super Bowl, in the AFC title game, the Bengals were seeking to get back to the big game and finally finish their story and claim their first ever Super Bowl title. Unfortunately, man, this is kind of rough. Those dreams took a scary turn for the Bengals as soon as training camp, when Joe Burrow limped off the field in a lot of pain. It like a social media video saw it. It's like, oof, this is bad. And for the team and its fans, though, it was a major injury avoided. And Burrow was expected to be back in time for the opener in Cleveland from a calf strain. So it wasn't anything too bad at first. But due to all that missing time from training camp, Burrow and the Bengals were really out of sync to start off the year. They got plastered and brutalized by Cleveland, and they went on their way to a 1-3 start. Now, they did turn it around with a little 4-game winning streak over Arizona, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Bills, but that offense really had its switch flipped every week in that stretch. They were still all out of sorts. Like, they were really inconsistent per se. Now, when you look at the Bengals, what else went wrong for this season? Well, you just look at what happened in Baltimore in Week 11. Joe Burrow suffering that midseason wrist injury that ended his season. So this was days after the Bengals were upset by the Texans at home. They had to go on the road, face the Ravens on the short week, and they were already being dominated by that strong defense. Things got worse towards the end of the first half. Sure, the Bengals scored a touchdown to make it close, but Burrow got tackled on his throwing wrist, which was already having issues pregame. So you have Burrow already struggling. Now he's hurt. And as with the many other quarterback injuries that were happening early in the season, you knew once Burrow left the game and was later ruled out for the season, Cincy's season and any playoff aspirations were pretty much over. Well, until it quite wasn't. More on that in a bit, because there's one more issue that the Bengals had this season, and that was in the secondary. Because when Jesse Bates left to go to Atlanta, that was going to be an issue, of course, but it's an issue that still can't be knocked on, because Cincy's passing defense was a very bad unit, especially in the deep middle of the field. Like, it was a dam ready to crack open and then burst. They just gave up way too many big plays and allowed too many points on a frequent basis. So that's something that they really need to address in the offseason. But on a more positive note, going back to the point of, Cincy's playoff aspirations, like seemingly not over yet, you have to look back at Jake Browning, the backup quarterback. He surprisingly played well for as long as he could. While it was rough sledding at first with that Pittsburgh game, Browning went on to perform better than expected. He kept the offense engaged in the air and with his legs, spreading the ball around to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, his main receiving core, as well as Tyler Boyd, and even got some backups involved as well. So, yeah, he faltered down the stretch against the Steelers and the Chiefs. He still went on to finish the year with 12 total touchdowns, and that included 3 rushing touchdowns in place of the injured Burrow. So, hey, I got to commend Jake Browning for coming in, like, not much experience, if any at all, and putting on, like trying to get the Bengals in playoff contention into the playoffs. So in the grand scheme of things, overall, the Bengals had so much adversity going into the season. They got off to a very rough start, and just as they were going to turn things around, they lose Joe Burrow. Not just in training camp, but later mid-season. But they almost got there. They almost got to the playoff. But unfortunately, just too many things, like the slow start, the multi-week injuries, having one of the hardest schedules in the league to top it all off, just too much to overcome. But on a more positive note, they did finish the season with a winning record of 9-8, and sure, it was last place in the division, but they could say that they won with the winning record, which was a first in the NFL. Every team in the AFC North division had a winning record, which is probably going to be hard to replicate for years to come. So looking at this offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals, it could be harder, easier to try and get back to that point of going back to the playoffs or even the conference championship game. But they have some leeway. They have some money to spend, like $52 million, and the 18th pick in the NFL draft. But man, they have some decisions to make. Like looking at the free agent list, it's a kind of lengthy one and some key ones to make, like receivers, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And you look at guard Max Sharping and tackle Jonah Williams, nose tackle DJ Reader, and then corner Chidobe Awuzie. So a lot of decisions that the Bengals have to make with their core. They franchise tagged Tyler Boyd, but he requested a trade after the two sides couldn't come to a long-term deal. So they have to make a decision, either trade away Tyler Boyd or hope that they can convince him to make a deal. If not, then they got to replace him. They did get some help in the secondary, like signing Geno Stone to a 2-year deal. But they did trade away Joe Mixon to the Texans. But in return, they signed Colts running back Zach Moss to a 2-year deal. So there's still a lot of things for the Bengals to fix up in the offseason. So looking at some of their needs to address is going back to that offensive line, which is almost perfect, which is almost solidified, except for two problem spots. The guard and the right tackle. Tackle Jonah Williams looked really lost each time he was out there. So looks like they can replace him. Right guard, whether it's Max Sharping, Cody Ford. The Bengals, I believe they resigned him. But he can be more served as a depth piece. So the Bengals really need to find some long-term starters at the spots. They're probably not going to find it in free agency any further, but maybe in the draft, they can finally find someone to solidify those spots. And then they got to address the cornerback spots. Uze is a top name. I noted earlier that the Bengals, they just lost him to the Titans. So they really need to use the draft to find two potential gems to replace him. And I say two because their corner spots are kind of iffy. So the Bengals, their playoff hopes were pretty much dashed when Joe Burrow got hurt in training camp. They were off to a very slow start. And then again in that game against Baltimore midseason. But I mean, they did their damnedest to try to stay alive in the playoff race, but their limitations with Jake Browning and the many other struggles with the team that came with it, it just reached their toll despite ending the season with a winning record. So if the Bengals want to make it back to the playoff dance this coming fall, they're not only going to have to retool on both sides of the ball, but the most important thing, which is key for a lot of teams, and that is stay healthy.